you have a tool with gratitude to help mitigate for the things that are life. Because, as you said, life can sometimes be very challenging. It can sometimes be flat out hard. And gratitude is a tool that helps mitigate for that. It empowers you to have options other than the bad thing that's happening to you.
Stay connected to gratitude. Hit the follow button right now and join thousands of listeners tuning in each week. We're the Gratitude Seekers. Come join us. Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Our guest today is a professional conflict mediator and author that focuses on conflict coaching, family and elder care mediation. She's the proud mother of 5 grown children and the grandmother of 4 lively little ones. And today we're going to be speaking about conflict. How does it happen and what we can do about it from the standpoint of it taking us away from that beautiful feeling of gratitude that we choose to be and we want to be in. And I'm sure that you have had this experience as well. I know I have, even though I'm grateful and I'm appreciating the good things in my life. Whenever something happens and I'm in some kind of conflict, I just focus so much on it that it just takes me away from that beautiful feeling of gratitude. So we have Kimberly Best here with us to talk about conflict and how to mediate it. Kim, welcome to the Gratitude Podcast.
Thank you. And I am very grateful to be here.
So am I. I think it's a wonderful topic, and you've done some amazing things, and I really admire your courage. And I wanted to go for the short version for your introduction, but I would love for you to share more about you, about the amazing things that you're doing, and the complicated situations in which you get yourself into to help. I think that's just amazing.
Oh, well, thank you for that. The thing I've learned about conflict, and I got into, as a registered nurse for a long time, I got into studying conflict from going through a very nasty divorce. And I realized that there had to be a way to do disagreement better. And then as I went through graduate school and the other courses that I did, I realized that most of us don't like conflict. And partly the reason we don't like conflict is because we don't have the tools to handle it. When we have a skill at something, it makes it not so bad. But conflict in itself feels threatening, and that just is. So it's never going to feel good. But I think if you look at it as a problem to solve, so conflict is normal. And I know a lot of people think it's a sign that it shouldn't happen. We tell ourselves a story that conflict shouldn't happen. And when we use shoulds, it's like, okay, is that a true story? Because maybe it's not that it shouldn't happen, because it actually should. Even our cells are in conflict. Conflict is hardwired into life. And I think one way to turn that into gratitude is conflict is always an opportunity to grow. It's always an opportunity to learn more about yourself, and it's always an opportunity to learn more about the other person. And I think if you can take out the who's right and who's wrong and make it a goal to learn, it can change not what conflict initially feels like, but what it feels like as you move through it, if that makes sense. As for your question about me and what I do in conflict, the scope is pretty large, because I've found that the tools apply no matter if you're working with interpersonal conflict or conflict between two people, family conflict, conflict in business. It grows bigger to community conflict. And then it goes bigger to national conflicts and international conflicts and wars. Many of the principles are the same, if not all. So I do work on a smaller scale with individuals, coaching with couples, with families, elders. You mentioned. I work with companies in conflict. I do. I mediate for the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, their police community conflict, which is just a beautiful thing to have people at such opposite extremes of um, positions come together and see each other's point of view, which is what mediation and conflict management does. And two, consulting on bigger conflicts that are around the world. So it's life changing for the people that we work with, all of us mediators and conflict managers. And shout out to Mediators Beyond Borders, which does work around the world. I've been a member of them for a long time. But the beautiful thing about learning how to do conflict better is it builds peace in our own lives, and gradually will build peace throughout the world as more and more people learn how to do conflict better.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because even the bigger conflicts, like you mentioned, are just small conflicts that grew in time and became something quite big. And yeah, it's really beautiful, because it's like it has this spiritual side to it. Like we can start with ourselves, and we can start small, and in that way we can have an impact on the world itself. So I really love that. And yeah, I think you're doing some amazing work, like I said, because one of the things that I've seen in my experience is that usually, personally at least, we get into conflicts with the people we care most about, and in the relationships we care most about. And that's very interesting, because we don't want that, and still that happens. And um, it's the same relationships that bring us the most gratitude. And that's why I believe having the kind of resources and the tools to manage conflict better is so important. So let's start from the smaller things. So the personal experiences. How can we deal with conflict better in our own, maybe family experience?
Yeah, so I want to just briefly address what you said about the spiritual side. It is spiritual, because when we're in conflict, we're showing a part of ourselves that maybe we're not so proud of. We're seeing that we're bringing a problem to light. And when we use conflict management and mediation and listen and try to understand each other's perspective and try to design what we want next to look like, instead of worrying about what happened in the past so much, and who did what and what time of day it was and all the things that make us go sideways. I have always experienced that space as miraculous, as so spiritual, because that's where we're supposed to be. Not that it's supposed to be easy, but that there's just grace when you open up the space to understand and to listen. So there are some few things that you can consider and take with you into any conflict. And number one, I think when you feel that conflict, what is the problem to be solved? What is the need that needs to be met? What's missing for someone or yourself? Um, that you can identify from you. And that is not to hand it to the other person and say, well, you did, because that's not a good way to start a conversation, but coming from a place of what I needed or how this affected me. Very vulnerable to say, what that was like for you. So it's a problem to solve, and the person, your partner, whoever you're in conflict with, is not the problem. The problem is the problem. So we make the person the problem. My wife is a problem. My friend is a problem. We can't solve for people, but if we identify the problem, we can solve the problem.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I'm sure many of you, my dear gratitude seekers, are givers. You give so much of yourself until you run dry at times. You too deserve to receive support, to matter, to be listened to, and to receive help when you need it. What I like most about therapy is that there's someone there to help you think about yourself for a change, about your needs, your desires, without feeling selfish. I know for myself that if I don't do this, I ultimately get resentful and frustrated, which hurts the relationships that I really care about. Give BetterHelp a try. It's online, it's flexible, and you get matched with a licensed therapist in no time. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/gratitude today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/gratitude.
Especially together. So that's the first one. The second one I'd say is we have a tendency to identify people by their worst moments and make that the entire person. So you had a conflict with someone, they blew up. That's all we see is that. And I think to remember when we're in conflict with someone that they are more and we've had more experience with them than this bad experience. So remember the good, like hold the good. I feel like with couples, with just about even the bigger conflicts, our social conflicts, we're often arguing about being right. And we're often arguing to win. And I have a very wise friend who's so smart. Decades ago, she said to me, "You know, Kim, when I fight with my husband, I always win because I'm better with words, because I'm more, assertive than he is. And one day I realized that for me to win, I have to make him lose. And I want to love enough that I don't have to make someone lose. So love enough that you don't have to make someone wrong. Because the truth is, in a conflict, we do hold at least two truths. There is not one truth. There's your truth and there's the other person's truth, and there will be a commonality in it, but we tend to want someone to see everything through our eyes and agree with all of us, everything we said. We need to let go of that because that's not attainable. So looking for what is right in a conflict, what the other person is saying, listening to understand is a good way to do that. And maybe to value the relationship more than being right. Yeah.
I love that. And it actually is related to gratitude. Like the first thing that you mentioned, the fact that we should have the whole perspective and not just the conflict itself and the worst thing that the other person said or did, but to actually appreciate the whole relationship and all of the things that that person means to us, or that all of the qualities that that person has, instead of just thinking about the last bad thing that she or he said, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Another, I have the wisest friends. I'm so grateful for it, but a very wise, my muse in my life. I believe we all need someone to help us have that space, because when we're in conflict, most people come to me and they're like, he's a narcissist and she's a narcissist. Everybody thinks the other person's a narcissist. And the truth is, none of us are so narcissistic. All of us are when we're in pain, because when we're in pain, it's all about us. That's just what happens. And awareness will help change that. But most of the time, we don't even see that we're making it all about us because we feel threatened in conflict. We feel attacked even when we're not. It's just how our body responds, which is a whole nother topic. But So this wise mind muse says, just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I'm against you. I
Mm.
still love you. It means that I am me. It means that my biology is different, my life experiences are different, so therefore my views are different. So we have to make that space for someone to be okay being them, which means they won't always agree with us. But right now, we take somebody who doesn't agree with us, say politically, say you hold a different political view. Well, I can't have anything to do with a human being who has a different political view than mine. They're a horrible person. When in fact, we share so much in common. We're parents, we're children, we're siblings, we're members of our community. We have the same needs. We share all these things, but to take one piece of someone and reject the whole person because we don't agree with a part of them is I hear myself saying this, I'm like, isn't that just a little crazy?
Definitely.
Right? So just
Yeah.
because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I'm against you. And it also doesn't mean you have to be against them. Because that's the energy we create then, right? Like I'm guessing you believe that energy is contagious, that
Hmm.
you can sense that and it spreads. So you walk in with anger, it creates suspicion, it creates attention. You walk in with a smile, it creates relaxation. I mean, sometimes coming into conflict, the thing to think before you go into it is, what experience am I committed to cause through this? What is it I want
Mm.
to accomplish at the end of this? Do I want to win? And what's the price for that? It's going to hurt the relationship. Do I want to be understood? Fair enough. Am I willing to understand the other person first? Because most of the time it takes listening before someone's willing to hear you. So coming from a place of curiosity, I know how I feel. Explain to me how you feel. And then can I tell you how I feel? And then listening for not what is wrong, because our tendency is to say, that's not what happened. That's not what you think. That's my favorite, when someone tells you what you think. But it happens, it's common. That's how we've learned to argue. It doesn't help relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really curious, what's your take on um so I'm sure that there are listeners that fear conflict, and instead of going into a possible conflict, they just internalize things. How can we, and in turn, I think that actually leads somewhere along the way to a conflict. Uh, at least this has been my experience, and I'm curious what's your take on this.
That is such a great and beautiful question. Um, I have, so there's, fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, um, give in to make conflict go away. I've polled a lot of people, and I find most people are conflict avoidant. And I mean, yeah, some people are hardwired to like conflict, but most of us um, don't like it very much. So I think I learned I'm conflict avoidant. That's part of why I do the work I do, right? It wasn't working out so well, but part of the reason that it wasn't working out so well was I realized I wasn't being honest.
Mm.
If I'm not saying what's really going on with me, I'm not being honest. And honesty is something I value a lot, and I've always thought myself to be pretty honest. It was a shock to realize if I'm hiding who I really am, I cannot tell you how much courage it took to change that. And it still takes courage every time I feel like I need to bring up a conflict to be true to the person I'm in conflict with and myself. And the irony of that is it brings people together if it's done well, because there's a wall between us. If I'm hiding part of me that's unhappy or confused or has an unmet need, you can feel that. The other person can feel that. And they start building their own wall. Um, Lots of things can happen in that. But when you can come to a space where both of you can sit down and work through it, there is almost nothing that I can think of that starts building um, people together, starts wiring us together as going through that. And part of it is the honesty. When we have a problem and talk about it, chances are the other person, all of us have those problems. All of us feel these things. We don't talk about them. The more I talk to people, the more I realize we all carry so much that we haven't had permission from ourselves and others to bring to light. But I believe that when we bring things to light, they lose their power. They lose their mystery. We can work with them when we can see them. And that's the same thing that happens with conflict.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I was thinking about just sharing some of the things that you're going through. When you're just keeping them to yourself, they look so big and so complicated. But when you just share that with someone and you just I don't know, verbalize it, you bring it to light, like you said, it, in many situations it just makes it feel so much less of a huge deal than it was in your head. And especially when you hear that somebody else says that, yeah, I know how it is, I went through that as well, you know, you feel that you're not alone anymore. And yeah, you feel that it's possible to overcome it. And I guess it's something similar, right, to what you just mentioned.
Yeah, you worded that beautifully. That is true. And we can spread that feeling. I believe that we all need a muse. We all need that trusted person, maybe a third party, that can help us see what we don't see in the moment when we're stuck in our own pain. I think. Yeah, like I said before, I have one, and I tell people I'm good at my job, and I'm not bragging. I'm good at my job. I get people pretty well. I listen. I relate to people pretty well. I say I'm really good in conflict, unless it's my own,
Mm,
because when it's my own, I can only see what I can see. And
yeah,
just to have the wisdom to get another perspective, it makes it smaller then, because you're 100% right. It blows up to feel like it's about us. We're flawed. It's an attack on us. We're not good enough. I mean, the things that come with the conflict, just the side effects. And to have someone say, well, maybe it's this and it's this and this as well. There's just a whole different perspective that it's like, okay, that wasn't so bad, and it makes sense now.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, we see that when it comes to other people as well, like when they come to us with different kind of situations, we have a whole different perspective than they do, because in many of the situations we are outside of the conflict. We are not
Mm.
so attached to being right, or to seeing things in a certain way, or we're not that attached to some emotions that have to do with that conflict. So of course that helps us have a totally different perspective on the conflict itself. And yeah, I think this is very powerful. And I'm curious if you feel like this is similar, or if this is the same in conflicts that have to do with the workplace.
Oh, such a good question. I think you were reading my mind, because in my head I was thinking about how it even relates to workplace. And I was thinking there's a couple things that typically go on in workplace. Number one, we forget our colleagues are more than our work partners, I experience a lot of people in workplace not knowing anything about the other person. And in the absence of truth, um, our brains make up a story. So my best example is a group I worked with, a company I worked with, and they all had a story they told each other. This person's on her Facebook all the time, on her phone. She's always on social media. Well, the truth was, when we sat down and said, okay, tell me about who you are, get to know them on a personal level after they've worked together for years. Um, this person was on her phone because her father was in the hospital getting his leg amputated. Nobody would have
Mm,
guessed that, right? So we make up
yeah.
stories about other people, and it's a quick and easy fix for our brains, but I don't know how we can ever get that story right. It is going to be a not true story. There might be pieces of truth in it, but it's not that person. So, one thing it does is give people the opportunity to get to know each other a little better, which again will just naturally give us more grace for each other. And then it's unsaid expectations very often. It is not having a voice in what your workplace looks like. Nobody wants to be a robot. We all want to feel like our opinions matter, our ideas matter, that we have some autonomy, and you can create a workspace like that. And then, of course, there's sometimes the people you just don't get along well with, and that happens. I mean, you have people that trigger you. You have people that you're not going to get along equally well with everyone, but you can find a way to be respectful even to the people that you don't want to be best friends with. So the answer is yes and no. You're right. The interpersonal conflict, the relationships that matter the most. Um, they're deeper, so they touch deeper things in us. But on a bigger level, they are similar. All the conflicts are similar, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I
And
had a person say, their organization went through this, and I made myself available for when they're having a conflict that they feel they can't work through. Let me know, and we'll work together. We'll mediate or coach, whichever's needed. And after each of the employees had voiced what they'd been carrying and didn't have a place to talk about, one of them said to me, she said, if at any point in my former jobs I would have had this service, I wouldn't have left.
yeah.
Because instead of getting so many problems built onto you that you feel like your only choice is to go, and don't we do that in relationships too? We get so many problems pile up that we feel like the only solution is to leave. Instead of that, it's like, let's address the problems, and then maybe we can stay.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because we, circling back to what we just talked about in the beginning of the interview. um, when we are in conflict, we tend to forget about the good things. We tend to forget about the qualities that we appreciate about the other person, the good things that the good moments, the good experiences that we had. And yeah, that's a pity. In many situations, we tend to see people in a different way because of the conflicts, and we tend to remain with that image of the other person. And it's sad, isn't it?
You read my mind again. I was writing down a thought that I was having while I was listening to you, and you just leaned into it, and that was, one of the things that we do that serves no one as far as the relationship goes is, we see the present from a lens of the past. And that is to say, you have something you want to talk about, and you say, well, I know what he's going to do. I know what she's going to say, because in 1984, she did this when this came up. And I like your laugh. But we do that all the time. Like, I can't go to my boss because I know what he'll say. No, you don't. You're living in the past. He said that before. He's not necessarily going to say that now. And by not giving him the opportunity, you are robbing him of an opportunity to be more than what you thought he was. Or to even learn and have changed, because we all change. We don't repeat the same thing. And sometimes we have tendencies, but still to not assume that, again, the worst. You're assuming the worst with that. And you could even be honest enough to say, I wanted to talk to you about this, but a part of me is afraid that it'll turn out like it did last time. So I just am hoping that it won't when I say, it really frustrates me when you come home late, or whatever the issue is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I was just thinking about an example. It's somehow outside of the scope of our conversation, but it led me to this. At one point, I went to a business event, and there was this speaker that was a big business leader, and he spoke at that event, and he was so arrogant, and he was just he didn't provide anything of value. And I got this image of him, and I thought, okay, this is how he is. And the next year at the same event, he had completely changed, and uh, his speech was so valuable and so interesting and so charismatic, and for me it was so interesting to see that it was the same person. And I could have said, okay, I would just skip this speech, because I know how he is. I know what he's capable of and what he'll come and say. But actually, that huge change was, for me, was something very interesting to acknowledge and to see that people can change, and even in just 1 year, he could be a really different person, and he can change so much. And I think this is applicable in so many situations.
That's a beautiful story. So I would even throw in addition to that, maybe he didn't change in a year. Maybe he was just having a really bad day.
Yeah.
Or maybe someone who helped him brief his speech was like, go in it like this. And that's not even who he is. It's like, and maybe he did change over a year, but all we're having is that snapshot of that person. And our tendency is to draw a whole 3-hour film based on a snapshot, when we need to see all the snapshots to know what's going on, to be able to put them together. And it kind of goes back to, kudos to you for being brave enough to not assume it would be exactly the same and try it again. But it kind of goes back to seeing someone's worst moment and defining who will be with them and who they are based on that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's something that's so powerful. And I like to think in my own conflicts. Okay, did he or she eat well before before us having this conversation? Because I know that I do this whenever I haven't eaten enough, or I skipped breakfast or lunch or something. I know that I have a shorter fuse, and it's easier for me to get mad for simple things, and get in conflicts, even if they're not big, but just small conflicts, just because I didn't eat. And it's funny, but this is how we work. At least this is how I work.
Oh, everybody does. We call that being hangry. I
Exactly.
don't know
Yeah.
if you've heard it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe your, shoulder's been hurting all night, or you didn't sleep well, or, something happened with your children. It's hard to be pleasant all the time. And it's amazing the impact that it's just amazing when I hear you talking about how it impacts folks to see something negative that makes us not want to know, not lean into curiosity, really have a hard time giving grace to that person. In full disclosure, I'm a pretty easy to get along with. I think my kids might disagree, but but I have road rage. So we have
Mm.
really heavy traffic, and I'm always in a hurry. And I'm like, why are these people doing this and that? And I have to tell myself, I have to remind myself that, yeah, the person who cut me off or whatever, I don't know. I don't know that they're not going to the hospital in
Yeah.
a hurry. I don't know. So I everything that I talk about, I have to practice. It's not, none of this comes naturally to us. Our natural instincts are to protect ourselves. Um, our natural instincts are to avoid being hurt at all cost, and whatever it takes to do that. And our natural instinct is to want to be right. But we have other
Yeah.
instincts too. We have a need to belong. We have a need for relationship. We have a need for love. So we just have to be aware of ourselves. Am I letting this need to be right, to have the last word, to whatever it is, have more weight in my relationships than the connection? What is the impact of what I'm going to do? Sometimes what we do is a quick fix with a long-term break. It
Mm.
feels good in the moment, maybe, to yell at someone, but it doesn't feel good that next moment when you feel bad for doing it, but you don't bridge that bad moment, you know. So I always say, I do want to say that when you hit a wall, and that is fine, you said something I can't tolerate, we're done. With conflict awareness, conflict resolution, with help, you can turn, and you can learn to do it on your own, to turn that wall into a door. There is always the what next. Okay, we said this to each other. It, it was awful for both of us. What do we do next? And I believe that's the step that's almost always missing. We hit the wall, we let the wall stay there, and we never address the what next, to reconnect after that, to learn after that, and to grow after that.
Yeah. This is such a great idea, and yeah, like you said, we build so many walls, and we do that in the relationships that actually matter most for us. And I think that's fascinating, because we care so much, and
Mm.
we want to connect, to belong, and still we choose in many situations just to be right, or to feel good in the moment. And I wanted to share something that I read in the book, and um, I love doing. So it's not that I don't get mad, because a lot of people just think that I'm a really calm person. I do get mad, but in situations in which, for instance, the communication is through WhatsApp or email or some sort of writing, I write the angry email or the angry text. I let myself live that emotion and write whatever I feel that isn't right, um, in the situation and in relation to me. But afterwards, I delete the part that isn't kind, that is just my emotions bubbling up and saying things that I might not want to to experience, and to say to the other person, when it comes to seeing the relationship from higher standpoint and seeing the bigger picture. So yeah, I love
That's
to do that.
brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So I remember, especially, going through the divorce, and we'd have this big conflict, and I would write an email so sure of my rightness that I was speaking truth, which to the person reading it would have sounded a lot like blame. But to me, it was like I'm telling my truth. But if I went back and read it 2 days later, or I was like, ooh, then you can see it. So taking the pause, doing what you did, writing what you're vehemently feeling in the moment, writing that down so that it gets out of you and then destroying it. I've done that a couple times, and I've been afraid I'm going to accidentally hit the send button because I wasn't
No.
smart enough not to put their email address on the top of it. But I also tell people, like, if you're having a hard time letting go of something, you're in a relationship and you're having a hard time of letting go of some past hurt, that a way to do that, we need to symbolically let that go. If we want to, we can continue to hold on to it. We could explore why you'd rather hold on to it than let it go. But if you want to let it go, writing it down and then burning the paper and watching this, like, picture all of the weight of that going up with the smoke. I always say don't do it inside your house, but but it's effective. So find a symbolic way that you can let it go. For me, a tool that I developed, just came across a few years back, I was like, oh, I wish I'd known this my whole life, especially around things I can't control. And that's most of life, right? We can only
Yeah.
barely control ourselves. We can't control, what goes on around us. I would start in my imagination. I pictured this foggy kind of globe, this mysterious looking kind of globe that has this, fog inside of it. And I would put my concerns in there, what I can't control. I'm afraid of this. I'm worried about this. There's nothing I can do about it. I would put that in, and I would, in my mind, hand it out with my arm open to the universe and say, take this,
Mm,
because I can't carry this. And
yeah.
it's crazy how the next right thing would come along. It will come along if we stop looking for it. It was amazing to me. I still do it. And I tell people, you might want to picture, putting it into a bird and the bird flying off with it. Whatever will help you visually release some of this stuff. I mean, it works. As crazy as it might sound, it works. And it helps us to be aware of when we're trying to control something that is not ours to control,
Yeah.
which we can't control the circumstances in our life. And, you know, um, things happen that we say aren't supposed to, but that happen just because it's life.
Yeah.
Um, and our job, I think, is to control, to whatever degree we can, who we are in those circumstances. And that's a hard enough job.
Exactly. Exactly. I love what you just said because it's so true. And um, a lot of people talk about gratitude and how amazing it is to manifest all kinds of things and to live a totally different life and um, so on and so forth. But I think um, so. One of the things that I love to speak about is the fact that we do have quite a lot of challenges, and it's hard sometimes to be grateful. And unless we do something like what you just mentioned, to find a way to let these things go and let them fly away, it's hard for us to make place for gratitude and for appreciation for other people or for our life in general. So yeah, I think it's so true. And yeah, I believe we need to be aware of this and to take this on and to not think that everything's gonna be perfect once we practice gratitude, and we won't have any kind of challenges and any kind of conflicts, but to embrace the fact that we will have challenges, we will have conflicts, and it's just about us mediating them. It's just about us finding ways to deal with them better.
You are exactly right in what you said about mediating them. That is exactly true. You have a tool with gratitude to help mitigate for the things that are life. Because, as you said, life can sometimes be very challenging. It can sometimes be flat out hard. And gratitude is a tool that helps mitigate for that. It empowers you to have options other than the bad thing that's happening to you. And I'm hearing you describe the effort to choose gratitude. And I'm thinking that with all of this conflict mitigation work, working things out between people in conflict, it's not easy, but it is easier than not doing it. So it's a
I love that.
short term, in the moment, an hour, a week, whatever it takes to get through it, as opposed to this building up over a lifetime where it becomes a pile so big, it seems, and maybe is, immovable. Though it's never too late, but it can be. You might have to reset. You might not be able to unpack all that. So it's short-term work for long-term freedom versus not working in the short end and working a lot harder later.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's similar to what you mentioned earlier about reacting in a moment to a conflict and sending an angry email or message, or react just saying that something that feels good in the moment and feels that I'm right. I should say this to this person because I know that I'm right and I know that this is the truth, but actually hurting the relationship itself.
That's exactly right. And most of the time, we're not very proud of ourselves after we do that anyway. We might justify it pretty well, but deep down, we don't feel very good about that. In the moment, we do. Well, I guess I told him, but about 2 minutes after that, when we've calmed down. And I think through all of this, there's been a reference to taking a pause, like when you're in the heat of feeling emotional, and anger is fine. I don't know if you know Thomas Hubel. Are you familiar with him? A
No.
mystic. Yeah, you would be interested in his work, I think. But he says, he and William Ury, who's a mediator, famous mediator, wrote Getting to Yes and stuff. They said anger can be the fuel that moves something forward, or it can be the fuel that lights a match and burns everything up. So there is no shame in anger. I know a lot of people who think they're not supposed to feel angry. Of course, we're going to get our toes stepped on, but it's what you do with that. So when you feel a lot of emotion, to take a pause so that your brain can't work right. You can't think through those things. It feels like an attack. And take a pause and get yourself back to where you can see more than your side again. Whether that takes 10 minutes or an hour, that's probably the best tool you'll have. And then reflect on what was going on with you instead of what was going on with the other person.
Exactly. I love that. So we're nearing the end of our time together, and I wanted to ask you, where can our audience get in touch with you, get the book?
The book is on making end of life decisions, because as been a registered nurse since I was 19. I don't practice in nursing anymore, but that's another thing. People ask me sometimes what I do for a living, and I say I talk about the two things no one wants to talk about: conflict and dying. We're going to have both, and we can do them better. So the book is about having the conversations and setting yourself and your family up to have that last chapter in your life, and it can happen at any age. Be the ending that you want to have to your life story. So the book is How to Live Forever, a guide to writing the final chapter of your life story. And that's available on Amazon and any book sales. As for me, I'm Kim Best. You'll find me under Kimberly Best. And my company is Best Conflict Solutions, and that's at bestconflictsolutions.com. So if you have my name, you'll find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom and for being so present and so open in this interview. I really appreciate you being on the Gratitude Podcast.
I am truly grateful that I got to meet you and share space and time with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, Gratitude Seeker, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this interview. I really appreciate it. And if you could think of one person that would also benefit from it, share it with them. It might actually be the inspiration that they need to make their day or maybe even their life much better. Thank you so much once again. This has been Georgian Benta. Don't forget to keep seeking and spreading gratitude.